Hello. Welcome. Today we are talking about antiques and collectibles. This is a bonus addition to the Decluttered Decision Making Question Series, which was a 5-part series that ended last week. If you've not already seen it, head over to my YouTube channel and you can find the full playlist there with all of those different sessions. Like I said, though, today we are talking about some questions to help us decide about antiques and collectibles. I'm Suzanna Kaye, Professional Organizer, and I'm so excited to have you join me. I see we have a number of people already hopping on. Peg's here, and Linda says, "Hi, everyone. I'm early, eager to hear today's Thursday talk. So glad that you're here, Linda." Hi, Maria and Sue from freezing Texas. Yeah, you guys have some cold right now. We have Jody's here. Hi, Jody. I'm actually going to be, Jody is head of the Moms Who Dare group for the empty nesters. If you're an empty nester, check out her Facebook group. But I will be live in Jody's group on the evening of March 1st. So if you want to find out more about that, make sure to check out my emails and check out my Facebook group because I'm hosting about Jody's group and my live session with her coming up there. So hi, Jody. Great to see you. Kathy's here and Rita. Oh, Rita's waiting for sleet and ice to come. Whew, you guys are cold. Hey, Jane and Janelle and Mary. I'm so glad to have all of you here. Well, as you hop on, I might not be able to say hi to everybody who hops on, but please let me know in the comments who you are and where you're joining from. As I mentioned today, antiques and collectibles. Now, this is one that every time I talk about decluttering, this comes up because these are the harder ones to figure out what you should do with them. There's so many what ifs involved in your antiques and collectibles, right? So to start this off, before we head right into those decluttering questions with them, let me know in the comments, is there anything that you collect or any antiques that you have that either you absolutely love and would never part with, or that you are interested in learning more about how to handle? I would love to hear what types of antiques and collectibles all of you have. Jody says, thanks for the shout out. Can't wait to share you with the community. It's going to be so much fun talking about decluttering, of course. Welcome. Trudy asked, Jody, what's the name of your group? It's Moms Who Dare. Moms Who Dare. If you search Facebook groups for Moms Who Dare, then you will find it. Welcome, Nancy. All right, let me know in the comments what types of antiques and collectibles you have. And before we get started with the first question, I did want to remind you tonight I have my webinar. It's goal setting, how to plan right and reach for your dreams. So if you've ever struggled with setting goals and actually achieving them, we're going to break it down, the mental side of it, as well as give you some step-by-step. And I will use examples from my own life. So make sure if you've not already registered for tonight's webinar tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And tonight is Thursday, what is today? Thursday, not the 28th. I'm looking at the wrong calendar. The 24th, February 24th. So you can join me tonight. Head over to SuzannaKaye.com and click the store link. And that's where you can register. Remember, if you're part of the membership, if you're a Pathfinder, you can get $5 off before the webinar starts by logging into your online library and using that link. And I hope you join me. All right. We already see, Linda's got Beanie Babies. Man, the 90s were filled with Beanie Babies, weren't they? I remember people were Beanie Baby crazy and they were so cute and fun. That's awesome. Suzanne has a bunch of furniture, antique furniture, and somebody has silver plates, crystal, that type of thing. Hey, Linda. Linda's home from cataract surgery just in time to see us all. Oh, hopefully you see us better now that you've got cataract surgery. That's wonderful. I'm glad it worked out okay. Jane says that she has a Queen Anne chair and old silverware. So there are a lot of antiques and some collectibles in this group, which I absolutely love. So when we are thinking about our antiques and collectibles, there are a number of questions we want to ask ourselves in order to make the right decisions, not only about whether or not to keep the item, but also to decide if you do want to let it go. Do you want to sell it or donate it? How would you like to let it go? And these are some of the questions that you can ask yourself to help you make decisions on some of those antiques and collectibles. All right, so the first question to ask yourself is it worth the time and energy to sell it? Is it worth the time and energy to sell it? And we're talking about both mental and physical energy, remember. So not everything, just because it can be sold, should be sold. Sometimes things take more time and energy than the value we will receive in income. So for example, if you've heard me talk about, like the ice cream maker. There's an ice cream maker. It would have taken a long time to research all the details about it, create the listing, contact the people who have questions, mail the ice cream maker out just for receiving $10. So that the value just isn't there, even though you can get $10, not worth your time to sell sometimes. I mean, everybody's limit is different. Some people, $10 might be worth it because you have more time. Some people, $100 might not be worth it because time is much more valuable to you right now. You have to know your own number. But antiques and collectibles, those are a unique time and energy question because they usually do require even more time and energy in order to sell them. So they will require more research. They will require finding the right group or people to sell it to. They will require a lot more interaction with people considering buying an item that is an antique or collectible because they want to make sure that they know all of the information about it. So the time and energy to sell an antique or collectible is most likely going to be exponentially more than something like that ice cream maker. So you really want to think about what is the true value, what income you will get from that item, from selling that item, versus the amount of time and energy it will take for you to sell it. That includes researching where to sell it, figuring out the right groups, figuring out how much to price it for. Because just because it's listed on eBay, you see, talk about Beanie Babies, you see like that, the Diana Beanie Baby doll, which is supposedly very valuable. You see it listed on eBay for, I think there was one that was $660,000 listing. The problem is it's not selling for that. So just because you might see things listed on some of these auction sites for really high dollar amounts, at the same time that $660,000 listing was up on eBay, there were the same Beanie Baby doll, the Princess Diana one, was selling for between $4 and $10. Those were the auctions that were actually selling. So when you're researching, you can't just look at what it's listed online for. It's what it's selling online for, right? And it's going to take a lot more time. So think about the amount of time and energy you are willing to invest versus how much you can realistically get for the item. Now, when we are thinking about how much we can get for the item, a value of an item has nothing to do with how valuable it is to you. The value of the item is simply how much somebody else is willing to pay for it. Period. It has nothing to do with how much you think it should be worth. It's simply how much can you find that somebody else is willing to pay for it. So sometimes we have to readjust how we're thinking about the value of things because we might see it differently. And we'll get some questions that help with that coming along, because this is only question number 1. All right. So really quickly, before we go on to question number 2, I see we've got people with jewelry. Janelle has jewelry. Hey, BT. Linda has furniture and quilts. We've got furniture, artwork, silverware, china, jewelry, other stuff. Oh yeah, there's so many different things. Old silver, wedding silverware from BT. Yep. Yeah, so many great things. Jody says, a good question for sure. I was going to sell a chair on Facebook Marketplace and have since decided to simply donate it for the time it would take to put it out and then having strangers come to my home. And it is so, so true. Sometimes it's just not worth the time, right? Good morning, Sherry and Lori. Lori says she's got everything plus the kitchen sink. I love it. All right, so question number 1 was, is it worth the time and energy to sell? And antiques and collectibles usually take a lot more time and energy to sell, and researching the value is probably one of the harder parts. Question number 2, what steps will be involved in selling this? So a lot of times we fail to be realistic about what's really involved. So we might think, we have this china set. Why don't I just list it and then it will sell and no problem? Or I'll just take it to the antique guy down the road, no problem. Realistically, though, there are a lot more steps involved. So if you're going to sell things, and I mean really take it seriously to sell them, then you will need to research all the different details about the item, the manufacturer, any of those specific details that are going to help with your listing or help you identify what you have, the condition of your item, what types of groups you can sell it to, what the true value is right now in the marketplace for the item. Remember, this has nothing to do with how much you paid for it, how much anybody ever paid for it. It has to do with how much people are paying for it right now. So there are so many steps involved in selling it. So we really need to think about what steps are involved in selling that item before you sell it. And then this is the biggest question that I think clarifies whether the item should be kept, sold, or donated the most. And it's my favorite. So question number 3, what is my purpose for keeping or selling this item? And this is my favorite out of all these questions. I think this is my favorite. What is my purpose for keeping or selling this item? Now, when we're talking about the purpose, sometimes we might be keeping an item such as a quilt, knitted by one of your family members. We might be keeping it as, connection to that family history or connection to that person. You might be keeping it for passing on to future generations in order to continue that family history and that connection. So that's one purpose, and that might be a purpose for keeping it. Another purpose that you might have for keeping it might be you feel like the value will increase over time. So with some things, not with as many things as we think, but with some things, the longer you keep it, the more valuable it might become. Now that right there is a gamble though, right? Because the Beanie Babies, for example, that was the thought with the Beanie Babies is if you just keep them for longer and longer and longer periods of time, they will become more and more and more valuable. But since the 90s, they came out in the early 90s. Since the early 90s, when this big Beanie Baby craze happened, there are very few of them that have become significantly more valuable. And those that have become significantly more valuable are not likely to be in your collection because most of those were some sort of special release or a mistake or a limited run. So there's one Beanie Baby, an elephant that had a run of like 5,000 of them. And after that 5,000, they changed the color of it. So it's the specific color of that one, of that limited 5,000 run that are actually of high value. So of the, thousands and thousands of different types of Beanie Babies out there, the likelihood of you happening to have that limited run, one of those 5,000 in mint condition to be valuable enough is very unlikely. Most of the time we have the types that were more common and they're selling for, the usual between 99 cents to maybe up to $10, most of them. Most of them are not selling for more than what they were originally purchased for. So that's one example of when you're keeping it. If you're keeping it in order for it to gain in value, it might not gain in value. It might remain consistent. It might drop significantly. There are a number of collectibles that dropped significantly and that are then worth almost nothing over time. But there are always some that will become more valuable. So the more you know the market for that item, the more you know the special interest groups that would be interested in them, and the more you're willing to take that gamble and use that space for that gamble, that will determine whether or not you should keep it in order to see if it gains value. Now, as far as selling, maybe you have a purpose for selling an item in order to make money off of it. I mean, that's the usual purpose we would think, right? You're going to sell an item in order to get some income. Great. That's when you go back to question number 1, is it worth the time and energy to sell? How much time and energy is it going to take? What steps will be involved in selling this? And how much money can you realistically make off of that item in order to sell it? So if your main purpose is selling it to get the income from it, then those questions are for you. Now, the other purpose for selling it that I hear most often is you're selling it in order to continue that history. You want that item to continue on in the world in the hands of somebody who will value it. And that's another great reason to sell it. And in that case, the time and energy needed to sell it might not be as big of a question for you. It might be more about you're selling it simply to make sure that it gets into the right hands. And then if that is the case, I'm actually going to skip to question number 6 right now. If that's the case, sometimes the steps that are needed to sell it can be so cumbersome and take so much time. And if you are overwhelmed already by all the things to declutter in your home and your to-do list, and you have so many other things, selling that item, since it's not really about the money, might not be as important as just making sure that it gets to the right person. So hopping down to question number 6 really quickly, maybe would this be valued more if I could donate it to someone who's either connected to it or who would value it? So connected to it, meaning maybe if it's something that, your grandmother made, maybe there are still people out there that are connected to your grandmother who would love to have that item because they are part of that memory, or that they were very close to her. If she had a Facebook group or a Facebook profile and had a lot of friends who would be really interested, maybe somebody who would like a piece of your grandmother would love that item. Or maybe there's a special interest group. If you have old postcards from a city that your great grandmother grew up in, maybe that city's local museum or historical society would love those postcards. So maybe at that point, it's not about selling the item. Maybe it's about just making sure that it gets in the hands of somebody who would value it. All right, so far, I know we jumped around here. We talked about, is it worth the time and energy, mental and physical energy, to sell? What steps will be involved in selling this? So being realistic. And my favorite, what is my purpose for keeping or selling this item? When you know your purpose, then you can make a better decision about whether you want to keep it, sell it, or donate it. When we are deciding to keep it because of the purpose of continuing the family line, things like that, be realistic also about who will actually want to take responsibility for that item once you are no longer able to. So do your kids actually want it? If not, it might be better to take a picture of it when you're ready to let it go. Take a picture of it, and then, like question number 6 said, find that person who's connected to it or who would value it. And the kids can have the picture of it so they remember the family history of it, but the item itself can continue to have that historical value. All right. All right. Before we go on to the next questions, as you can see, there are going to be 6 because I already hopped around to 6. Let's see what everybody else has said. So Patty says that she has the Madame Alexander dolls. Ooh, how cool. That's awesome. Linda says, yeah, Jody, that's the route I took too. She was talking about, Jody mentioned that instead of selling a chair with all the steps that it would take, she found that it was just much easier to donate it. I do that often. There are a lot of times where I look around at all the different things I need to do in my home, and I think this is just going to stress me out. For the amount of money that I can make, it's going to stress me out much more. I'd rather be able to give it to somebody else who could really use it so it doesn't hit the landfill, but it gets that second life and it's not another to-do item on my list. Lori says, same with Barbie dolls. Yes, Barbie dolls as well. All of those different collectibles, you really have to know exactly what you're doing and all the details about those collectibles, right? Because if you don't know exactly specifically what is of value, then you will end up holding on to a whole lot of things, taking up a whole lot of space for items that are really never going to gain that much value. So there are only very specific Barbie dolls that will be, that are currently of a high value or will become of a high value simply because there's a supply and demand. If they made a ton of that type, it's likely never going to be all that valuable, or at least not in your lifetime. Jody says, Linda, it was just simpler for that particular item. Absolutely, right? Oh, Jody said that she loved that question. Linda says some charities will auction vintage or antique items. It's true. And then that way it's a win-win. They are already connected to the auctions. And the right people who value those items are going to end up with those items because they follow those auctions. The charity gets the money so they can fund whatever their core purpose is. And you can rest easy knowing that it's going to end up in the hands of somebody who actually wants it and who will value it without you needing to go through all of the work of doing that yourself. So when charities do auctions or resell things, sometimes it's simply a win-win, right? So Jane says, I had old Scout, Boy and Girl Scout items, badges, books, etc., that I donated to those places. Yes. And that's perfect because there are so many different special interest groups out there right now. And these people love having part of that history, especially things like Boys and Girl Scouts, local cities and towns, a lot of times old schools. All of these places love to have a piece of that history. So you could try to sell it to somebody. It's going to be very hard to find a buyer, but those special interest groups that might not have the money for it are going to value it and cherish it and take care of it. I love that. Nancy says, we found a vendor at an antique mall to come look at our collectibles. They bought most of them for a flat rate. So much easier, right? We were happy that we got some money and didn't have to figure out where to sell it all. Yes, if you do have specific items that a dealer of some sort would be interested in, then it is so nice to have them look at it, see if they want it. It does take finding the person, arranging a time for them to see it. There are a lot of times where if the market's flooded with certain items, it's very hard to get a dealer to look at them. But when you can, that is a beautiful way to do it. Peg says, I've never understood keeping antique chairs that no one can sit on. I know, right? It's so sad to have items that are so useful that can't be used. I agree. Lori says, we have Afghan refugee families moving into our area. A neighbor works at a donation center and requested 8 dressers. We had one we were saving to sell in our yard sale this past spring or summer, but decided to donate it last week. That's wonderful. And, the goodwill that you will get just in that energy that you're putting out in the world, the way that you're helping those people, the positive feelings that you will have thinking about that is much better than whatever amount of money that probably would have ended up in your pocket, right? Because you will remember giving that much longer than you will remember what you spent any money that you got from it on. It's so nice to be able to do that. All right, so let's recap. First off, is it worth the time and energy that it takes to sell it? Because antiques and collectibles take much more time and energy. What steps will be involved in selling this? And do not forget the amount of research that it actually takes to truly sell an antique or collectible. So if you're trying to get the best money for it, then it's going to take a lot of steps. What is my purpose for keeping or selling this item? Are you keeping it in order to pass on a family legacy? If so, does somebody else from the next generation actually want it? Or would you just want to pass on the story and a picture of the item and find another group that would value the item itself? Be realistic about that. And also, if you're selling it, are you selling it for the money, in which case you're going to spend more of that time and energy? Or are you just trying to get it in the right hands? In which case, question number 6 is, would this be valued more if I could donate it to someone connected to it or who would value it? All right, so next is get honest about the item itself. Is it still in good enough condition? And just because Beanie Babies, I happen to know a little bit about those, and it came up. So an example of that is with Beanie Babies, if you have a higher value Beanie Baby, which is already unlikely if you just have a general collection, but if you do, it needs to be in pristine condition to get top dollar. It has to have the tag in pristine condition. Hopefully it has been protected in a protective case all of these years, not been touched, because the oils from your fingers can degrade it over time and reduce its value. So if it's just been in a box for years, that value is probably dipped down drastically just because it has not been preserved in the right way to get that top dollar. So is it still in good enough condition? Really look at the items that you have and look at the condition that it's truly in order to get a reasonable idea of how much that might be worth. Now, it does not have to be in good condition to be of value to somebody, but it has to be in excellent condition to get top dollar from a collector. So that's going to probably determine whether it's a donate or if it's just sell it, but not go into all the research, just sell it as a general item, or if you just want to donate it to somebody who will simply value it for what it is. So if it's not in great condition, then you might not be able to sell it for what you think that you can. And then question number 5, are there special interest groups or companies for this? So there are a number of collectibles and antiques where you can find a special interest group that will help you, identify if it's worth selling or if it's highly valuable, B, help you get connected to where to sell it or even sell it within the group, and C, depending on the number of special interest groups, will probably show you how much interest there is in the market. So if you have something very obscure, it's going to be much harder to sell. There probably aren't a whole lot of special interest groups for it. Maybe you have I don't even know. There's probably a special interest group for just about everything, but maybe you have like a Woody Woodpecker cookie jar from the 60s. Well, I think he was around the 60s or 70s. Well, if you did, maybe there aren't a whole lot of Woody Woodpecker special interest groups around anymore, right? So that's going to show you that this will be a harder item to sell. It's not that it's not sellable, and it's not that it might not be valuable. It's going to be harder to do your research and value the item. It's going to be harder to find the person who's interested in it because there are not a lot of groups of people who are interested. Meanwhile, something like Beanie Babies, first off, I would not want to recommend that you pay anybody to tell you what these items are valued at. So there's a lot of people that make money out there simply telling people what they think the value is. That's probably not worth the money that you would pay in order to get the value for some items. So these special interest groups, they can probably help you figure out what would be value, lead you to the right resources to research it. And if there are a lot of special interest groups or companies that deal with that type of item, such as Beanie Babies, they're probably going to be easier to sell. It does not mean that they're going to be more valuable. It just means that you are going to be able to connect the market of people who would be interested a lot easier, and you will be able to get information a lot easier. So some ways to find some special interest groups, if they are groups like the Boy and Girl Scouts, then you can find local troops and the companies that run those. Other ways to find special interest groups would be like Facebook. Facebook is a great way to find special interest groups. You just go to the group section and search, Beanie Babies collectibles or Coca-Cola collectibles, and you'll find all the different groups of people who like to talk about these collectibles. So think about, are there special interest groups or companies that deal specifically in those items? So hopefully those helped. I'll recap those again in just a moment. Sherry says, my grandmother saved me from storing my beautiful extensive collection of 1960s Barbies. She saved a box of their heads only. And Jody's laughing too. Oh my goodness, Sherry, that it's both tragic and hilarious at the same time. I hope that was not mentally scarring. That is so funny. A box of Barbie heads. I would love to hear what her thinking was with that one. Thank you for sharing that laugh. Love it. Love it. Someone said, good point. Easier to sell does not mean more money, especially if you have to pay for packing and shipping. Yes, a lot of times easier to sell usually means the marketplace is more flooded with them. So it's usually of a lower value. So just because there are a ton of special interest groups, it's going to be easier to sell, but you're probably not going to make as much money off of it. Lori says, we had an old Gamewell fire station alarm set up with ticker tape and bells on a stand. Oh, how cool. Took a bit of research to find the right person to purchase it. Got about $100 for it, and the person who collects fire station items was so glad to get it. And that's great. Yes, if you have the time to be able to research and find that specific person, it is wonderful. Then you know that the right person has it. You can make some cash. They're extremely happy about it. So it's all that whole time versus money. Yeah. So $100, that's nothing to bat an eye at. That's a good amount of money. And it sounds like it left you with a really good feeling, which is wonderful. Lynn says the BAM Children's Hospital puts Beanie Babies in a claw machine and lets the patients play once a day for free. See, now that is the type of thing where, if you have collected Beanie Babies and you look through the box of Beanie Babies or boxes, however many you have, maybe if they are not currently valuable, they're probably not going to gain much more value in the future because the market is flooded with so many of the ones that people have. So finding an organization that does something like this, like the claw machine, fantastic way to let go of some of these items when really, realistically, they're not going to bring in a whole lot of cash. So that's one great way. And then you can just feel really good about their next life. I love that. Yeah. Oh, Sherry says with the Barbies, it was heartbreaking 40 years ago. Yes, I can imagine. Oh, that's so sad and funny. I hope that your therapist was on hand. Ida says, only heads, funny and scary. Lori says, we've been known for decades in our neighborhood as the yard sale people. People think we have a store. That's great. If you love doing yard sales, that's fantastic, though. You have to love doing yard sales to want to do them. But they can be fun. I used to enjoy them back when my life was simpler and I did not have so much to do. Now that I have a lot to do, now I don't enjoy doing them as much. Joanne says, Mattel has a take-back program for some specific items at this time. Barbies, Matchbox, Mega. It'll be expanding the toy types in the future. They do not buy, but provide prepaid shipping labels. Oh, that's interesting. So that's an interesting thing to look into if you do have items like that. I wonder if they'd buy back just the heads. Linda says, I don't know if this was a UK thing. My husband had Subateo, I'm not sure if I said that right, soccer in the 1970s. We're getting rid of his collection. There's a magazine that features old Subateo collections for fans. Oh, perfect. So there is an interest in it. I don't know how much you might be able to get for it, but at least you could get them into the hands of people who would be very excited to have it. So that's exciting. Lori says, love the idea of the BAM Children's Hospital does with the Beanie Babies. Yes, and I'm sure that there are a number of other hospitals and children's groups that would do Barbies and all sorts of other children-appropriate collectibles. That was fantastic. Lori says, I have a neighbor that has a bunch of scary heads in their attic windows. That's creepy. That's more of a Halloween thing, but maybe not a year-round. Lori says, we used to switch the heads on our Barbie dolls. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I had my mom's Barbie doll when I was little, and her head kept falling off because it was ripped a little. Jody says, love this live. Great questions. Thanks for all you do, Susanna. Dare on. Thank you so much, Jody. And yes, check out Jody's group. When you go to Facebook groups, just type in Moms Who Dare. And March 1st evening, I'll be talking with Jody live on her Facebook group. We will be talking about decluttering and having that kind of chat, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Sherry says, maybe they want or need old heads. Now, that's hilarious and very twisted. Yeah, Lori's neighbors, it's year-round with the heads. Okay, so Linda says it's Subbuteo. No worries, though. Thank you, Subbuteo. I learned something new every day with you guys. I love it. All right, so before I recap, just a reminder, tonight we do have the webinar. So if you're not already registered and you're interested, then go to SusannaKaye.com and click on the store and make sure to register for tonight's webinar. It's tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and tonight is Thursday, February 24th, 2022, if you're watching this as a replay. If you are a member, a PATH member, then you do get $5 off. So instead of using the store link, make sure to log into your online library and use the link there so you can get your member discount on the webinar. So hop over. The goal setting, how to plan, right, and reach your dreams is the webinar tonight. I'm talking about the mental side of goal setting as well as the how-to, exactly how to break down your goals. So if you were like me, the type who can struggle sometimes to reach the goals, these are some ways to make it a lot less overwhelming and much more attainable. And I'll show you the how-to, especially with some of my personal goals. I'll be sharing those. So as a recap, for antiques and collectibles, think about first, is it worth the time and energy it's going to take to sell it? Because they do take more time and more both physical and mental energy. So if you're looking around and you have tons of things to do and you're already overwhelmed, this might not be the best choice for you. What steps will be involved in selling this? And do not forget how long the research step will take, making sure to actually value it for what people are paying in the market, not what it's listed for online, not what you feel like it should be worth. The value, remember, is only what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So what are other people paying for this type of item right now? And all of the other steps that go into it. What is my purpose for keeping or selling this item? What is the purpose for? We'll talk about selling it. The purpose for selling it, maybe it's to get money for it. Great. Then be realistic about how much money you will get and how much time it's going to take. Maybe it is to make sure that it gets into the right hands and continues that history and that legacy. In that case, depending on how much money you can get for it, and if you can truly get it into the right people's hands, it might be worth donating instead. If you're keeping it, are you keeping it really for you? Or are you keeping it to give to your kids? And if so, is it something that they are truly going to want? If not, then maybe just share the story. And once you're ready to let it go, make sure to donate it to the right person who will love it. Is it still in good enough condition? Be realistic about the condition the item's in, because with antiques and collectibles, if it's not in pristine condition or really good condition, it's going to affect the value greatly. So hanging on to a beat up old Beanie Baby with a missing tag or a beaten up tag or that's faded or dusty, probably going to affect the value to the point where it might not be worth it. And then it's just taking up space. And right now, if you're storing items, if you are feeling like you are overwhelmed and you have too much clutter, too much around you, then the amount of mental energy and space it's taking up might not be worth saving it longer in order to sell it one day. So be realistic about that. Are there special interest groups or companies for this? The more groups there are, the easier it will be to find somebody to buy it. But most likely that means the value is not going to be as high because the market probably has a lot of those types of items in it. The fewer groups, it may or may not be more valuable, but it's going to be much harder to find the right person. And then 6, would this be valued more if I could donate it to someone connected to it or who would value it? A lot of times we really just want somebody to see the value in it that we do. And through selling it, a lot of times you can't. It's very hard and it takes a lot more work. So if you don't have the time and energy to go through making sure that you find that right person, donating it is a great way. Because a lot of times these special interest groups and companies and people who have this interest might not have the money to get it, but they have the passion for it. So if your purpose for keeping it or selling it, is to make sure that it's valued and honored and gets to live on, sometimes donating it might be the best way. All right, so tell me in the comments, which of these resonated with you the most? Which of these questions did you really, really find most valuable? I'd love to hear that in the comments. And then Lori asked, what's the date of the Moms Who Dare? March 1st. Moms Who Dare is there all the time. The Facebook group is always there. So you can join the group now. And then March 1st, I believe you have to register. So join the group and then you can register for the March 1st event. I will be live with Jody that evening. I believe it's 7 p.m. Eastern time, if I remember off the top of my head. So, but search the Facebook groups for Mom Who Dare and then join that. So that way you can get accepted in the group and then you can register. Hey, Lori, good to see you. She says, I made a notebook of items in the house that have been inherited. When I die, they will know which items are inherited. If they don't want the items, they can be offered to family members. That's a good one. That's really good. Rita even says that's a great idea. Barbara says, a doll dealer sold some of my valuable dolls on consignment, sold some doll accessories for a commission, bought some for a flat fee, and referred my remaining items to an interested dealer. That's fantastic. If you can find a dealer who handles your specific type of item, that is often like gold. You might not get as high of a price income back from it as if you would if you were selling it yourself, but you're not going to spend as much time and it's going to make the whole process so much easier. So sometimes it's great to just find a dealer. You might not make quite as much, but the process is going to be so much easier. Nancy says, Lori, that's great to do. I asked my mom to put a sticker with a $ sign if it was a valuable thing and a heart if it was a sentimental thing. So I would know later when she was gone. Oh, that's cute. I like that. Trudy says that she loved questions 3 and 6. So 3 was, what is my purpose for keeping or selling this item? And 6 is, would this be valued more if I could donate it to someone connected to it or who would value it? Yeah, I love that one too. Those are really good ones. I think 3 is probably my favorite, my absolute favorite. I use that one all the time. Lori says, soft and fuzzy items are wonderful for nursing homes and memory care units. Absolutely. Cut off all the tags, buttons, eyes, tails securely attached. Wash on the gentle cycle with detergent and ammonia and completely dry it. Yes. And it is true. I've seen so many different memory care units and they absolutely love it. The dolls and the stuffies and anything from their childhood. They love that type of thing. Jane says 1 and 3 gave me a different way to look at things. And Sherry says, brilliant. Love it. All right. Well, if you are a Pathfinder, part of the Path membership, remember at noon, so in about 20 minutes, hop over to the Facebook group, our Campfire private Facebook group. We are going to be talking live about too many categories of papers and how to reduce all of the mental work that it takes when you have too many categories of papers. So how to reduce the too much. So head over there at noon if you're a Path member to the Facebook Campfire group. Make sure to join me tonight. If you've not already signed up, register now for the goal setting, how to plan, write, and reach your dreams. Tonight it will be me and you talking about setting goals and the mental side of it so that you can achieve the goals as well as the step-by-step. If you've had struggles with completing goals and setting goals, then hopefully this will help you out. Barbara loved question number 3. Yes, what is your reason? That's my favorite too. And Paula also loved them all, especially number 3. So Peg says, I wish I'd donated China. My sister and I took a lot of time sorting and packing it only to have a consignment shop go out of business. No money for me. China's a tough one right now too. Again, the market's just flooded with so many sets of China and not as many buyers right now. So that's a very difficult one. If you have China, it's probably not going to get easier to sell it as time goes on either, just because the marketplace right now is so flooded with it and there are so few buyers anymore. Trudy says, any way to test old China for lead? That I don't know. And I don't know, maybe you could even look it up by the type, the brand of China and see if they used lead in the production. That again would probably be one of those items that would be a lot more research involved in trying to figure that one out. Great questions today. Thank you again so much for joining me. I've absolutely loved it. You are beautiful. You're doing amazing things, and I love you. I will see you next week. Go make today amazing. Bye now.